The sun beat down mercilessly on the Sahara Desert as Commander Ray Walker wiped the sweat from his forehead. Through the thick windows of the UN Desert Research Station, he watched heat waves distort the horizon. The station's thermometer showed 118 degrees Fahrenheit, 48 degrees Celsius, just another typical day in one of Earth's most unforgiving environments. Walker took a sip from his water bottle, a habit as natural as breathing after 15 years in the desert. The research station's cooling systems hummed steadily, fighting against the relentless heat. His team of 10 researchers had been studying desert adaptation techniques, learning from local tribes who had survived here for thousands of years. The first sign that something was wrong came from their seismic monitors. The equipment picked up unusual vibrations, different from the regular patterns of sand movement they typically recorded. Walker checked the readings twice, then called his lead scientist, Dr. Brown, to verify the data. "These patterns don't match anything in our database," Dr. Brown said, frowning at the screen. "It's as if something massive is approaching from the upper atmosphere." Before Walker could respond, a deafening roar filled the air. The station's windows rattled as 3 enormous shapes descended from the clouds, their metallic surfaces gleaming in the harsh sunlight. They were clearly not from Earth. Each ship was at least the size of a football field, with strange symbols glowing along their hulls. "Get everyone inside," Walker ordered through the station's comm system. "Full lockdown procedures, now." The alien ships landed 2 miles from the research station, sending up massive clouds of sand. Through his binoculars, Walker watched as panels opened in their sides. Figures emerged. They were tall, at least 7 feet high, with silvery skin that reflected the sunlight. Their movements were smooth and precise, but something about them seemed odd. "They're not wearing any environmental protection," Dr. Brown noted, watching through another pair of binoculars. "How is that possible in this heat?" Walker grabbed the station's radio and began broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is Commander Raymond Walker of the United Nations Desert Research Station. We are a civilian scientific installation. Please identify yourselves." The response came in perfect English, transmitted directly to their communication system. "This is Supreme Commander of the 6th Fleet. Your planet has been chosen for integration into the Galactic Empire. Resistance is futile. Your environmental conditions are well within our tolerance range." Walker watched as more aliens emerged from their ships. They moved with confidence, setting up equipment without any apparent concern for the heat or the sand. He counted at least 50 of them now, all carrying what appeared to be weapons. "They're making a mistake," said Ahmed, one of the local guides who worked at the station. He pointed to the horizon, where dark clouds were gathering. "A sandstorm is coming. A big one. They don't even know what's about to hit them." Walker nodded grimly. He'd seen enough overconfident newcomers learn harsh lessons from the desert, but never aliens. He picked up the radio again. "Supreme Commander, we're detecting an approaching weather system. I strongly advise you to seek shelter or return to your ships." The alien response was immediate and dismissive. "Your primitive weather holds no threat to our advanced technology. Focus on your surrender protocols." In the distance, the wind began to pick up. Small devils of sand danced across the dunes. Walker ordered his team to begin storm preparation procedures. They'd need to document whatever was about to happen. "Should we try to warn them again?" Dr. Brown asked, securing the last of the external sensors. Walker watched as the aliens continued their work, oblivious to the danger approaching. Their ship's energy shields hummed with power, but he knew from experience that no technology was completely sandproof out here. Not even their advanced research equipment had managed that feat. "They'll learn," he said quietly, securing the station's reinforced shutters. "The desert doesn't care about advanced technology. It doesn't care about empires or invasion plans. It just is, and they're about to find out why humans had to become so tough to survive here." The storm wall approached on the horizon, a towering brown cloud that reached into the sky. The aliens were about to learn their first lesson about why Earth was classified as a death world by those who truly understood it. The alien base buzzed with activity as they set up their equipment under the scorching sun. Their silvery skin had started to take on a dull appearance, though none of them seemed to notice. Walker observed them through the station's thermal cameras, noting how their body temperature was rising steadily. "Their cooling systems must be failing," Dr. Brown said, pointing at the readings. "Look at these heat signatures. They're running much hotter than when they first landed." The aliens had spent the last 3 hours setting up what looked like energy generators and communication arrays. Their confidence was evident in how they ignored the increasingly strong wind. Sand had already begun to collect around their equipment, but they simply brushed it away and continued working. And walked up to the monitoring station, his face worried. "The Bedouin camps have all moved to the secure caves in the rocky valleys," he reported. "They say this storm will be the worst in months. Even the camels are restless." Walker nodded, knowing that when both the locals and their animals agreed on weather predictions, you'd better listen. He tried the radio one more time. "Supreme Commander, I repeat, this is your final warning. The approaching storm will damage your equipment and possibly harm your people. Please seek shelter immediately." The alien leader's response came with a hint of annoyance. "Commander Walker, your primitive concerns are noted and dismissed. Our shield technology can withstand the impact of meteors. A simple wind with suspended particles poses no threat." As if nature itself had taken offense at these words, the wind suddenly picked up strength. The first proper gusts of the approaching storm hit the alien camp, and their problems began immediately. The fine sand found its way into every crack and joint of their equipment. Their energy shields sparked and flickered as millions of charged sand particles interfered with the field generators. "Those shields are making things worse," Dr. Brown observed. "They're ionizing the sand particles. It's like they're creating their own electromagnetic storm." Through the cameras, they watched as the aliens finally began to show concern. Several of them were trying to clean their breathing apparatus, which had started to clog with sand. Others were desperately attempting to protect their more sensitive equipment, but the sand was getting everywhere. The Supreme Commander's voice came through again, but this time it contained a note of uncertainty. "Research Station, we are experiencing some minor technical difficulties. What is the expected duration of this weather event?" Walker checked the weather radar. The massive storm system was only beginning to arrive. "The main storm hasn't even hit yet, Supreme Commander. This is just the beginning. It will last approximately 6 to 8 hours." The aliens' camp had become a scene of increasing chaos. Their perfectly organized equipment was now being buried under drifting sand. Several of their soldiers were having trouble walking against the wind, their tall frames acting like sails in the strengthening gusts. "Look at their skin," Amd pointed out. "The sand is scratching their protective coating." He was right. The aliens' once smooth silvery skin was becoming dulled and scratched by the storm. Some of them had started to bleed a blue-tinted fluid where the sand had worn through their outer layer. Inside the research station, Walker's team continued to document everything. They watched as the aliens finally began to retreat into their ships, their movements now hurried and clumsy. Equipment was left behind, quickly disappearing under the growing dunes. "They're learning lesson 1, Walker said quietly. "In the desert, you don't fight the storm. You respect it. Prepare for it, and wait it out." The main wall of the storm arrived just as the last alien made it back to their ship. The massive brown clouds swallowed their vessels completely, the howling wind drowning out even the sound of their engines. Their ship's shields flickered frantically against the onslaught, creating strange patterns in the swirling sand. Walker checked the station's own systems one more time. They were sealed tight, their sensors protected by years of desert engineering experience. Outside, the storm raged on, teaching the aliens why humans had learned to build shelters long before they had learned to build weapons. The sandstorm hit with the force of a tidal wave. Inside the research station, even the reinforced walls groaned under the assault. The alien ships disappeared completely behind a wall of swirling brown dust, their energy shields creating eerie blue flashes in the darkness. 120 kilometers per hour, Dr. Brown called out, reading the wind speed sensors. Temperature dropping rapidly due to the dust coverage. Visibility down to less than 3 meters. Walker watched their external cameras with growing concern. The alien shields were doing exactly the wrong thing. Their energy field was heating up the sand particles, creating a localized electrical storm around their ships. Blue lightning crackled between their vessels, growing stronger by the minute. Their shield frequency is all wrong, Dr. Brown explained, studying the readings. They're treating the sand like large projectiles, but these particles are microscopic. It's like trying to stop a flood with a bulletproof vest. The first real signs of trouble came when one of the alien ships suddenly powered down its shields. Through the howling storm, they heard a sound like grinding metal. The alien's communication system crackled to life, filled with static and urgent voices. Emergency, systems failing. Sand in. Ventilation. The Supreme Commander's voice was barely recognizable. How survive this? Walker grabbed the radio. Power down all energy shields immediately. They're making things worse. Seal all external openings and shut down non-essential systems. The sand will find any gap larger than a micron. Through their instruments, they watched as the other ships finally powered down their shields. But the damage was already done. The superheated sand had created glass-like formations across their hull surfaces, and the electrical storm had fried many of their external sensors. Multiple hull breaches detected in the alien vessels, one of Walker's team reported. Their atmospheric seals are failing. The sand is getting inside their ships. Ahmed, who had been quietly watching, spoke up. This is why the Bedouin people never built permanent structures in the deep desert. Everything here must either move with the sand or be strong enough to let it flow around naturally. The storm continued its assault. Hour after hour, the wind howled, and the sand scored everything in its path. The aliens' perfectly arranged base camp vanished completely. Their advanced equipment, left outside in their hurried retreat, was either buried or torn apart by the wind. Inside their ships, the aliens were facing a crisis. Their air filtration systems, designed for space dust and artificial environments, were quickly becoming clogged. The fine sand particles were proving far more numerous and invasive than anything they had encountered before. Commander Walker, the Supreme Commander's voice came through again, weaker now. Our primary systems are failing. The sand, it's everywhere. How do humans survive here? We adapted, Walker replied simply. We learned to work with the desert, not against it. Your technology is impressive. But out here, you need more than just advanced machinery. You need generations of knowledge. The storm raged on for 6 more hours. Inside the research station, Walker's team maintained their vigil, documenting everything. They recorded how the alien ships, despite their advanced technology, were slowly being transformed into artificial dunes. The sand found every weakness, every design flaw that their creators had never considered because they'd never encountered an environment like this. Finally, as the sun began to set, the wind started to die down. The great wall of dust moved on, leaving behind a transformed landscape. Where the aliens had set up their base, there were only smooth dunes. Their ships sat half-buried in sand, their once gleaming surfaces now scratched and dulled. Walker looked at the thermometer. The temperature was already dropping rapidly as night approached. He knew that for the aliens, this was just the beginning of their challenges. The desert's night would bring a whole new set of problems that their technology wasn't prepared to handle. As night fell over the Sahara, the temperature plummeted from 118 degrees Fahrenheit to near freezing. The alien ships sat in silence, their once smooth hulls now rough with sand damage. Through the research station's night vision cameras, Walker watched as emergency lights flickered inside the vessels. Their power systems are struggling, Dr. Brown reported, studying the readings. The sand has clogged their external heat exchangers. They can't vent excess heat from their engines, but now they also can't generate enough heat to stay warm. The radio crackled. Research station. The Supreme Commander's voice sounded strained. Our environmental systems are malfunctioning. The temperature change. We weren't prepared for this extreme variation. Walker wasn't surprised. Most newcomers to the desert never expected how cold it could get at night. This is normal for the Sahara, he explained. We can experience temperature swings of over 70 degrees Fahrenheit from day to night. Suddenly, their sensors detected movement. Alien soldiers were emerging from their ships, wearing what looked like emergency spacesuits. They moved slowly, struggling through the deep sand, trying to repair their external systems. Those suits won't last long, Ahmed said, shaking his head. The sand got into their ships during the storm. Every time they open a door, they're letting more in. He was right. The aliens' movements became increasingly desperate as they tried to clear their equipment. Their suits, designed for the vacuum of space, were proving too bulky for precise work in the sand. Several soldiers stumbled and fell, their tall frames poorly balanced in the loose terrain. Commander Walker, the alien leader's voice came again. We're detecting multiple ground vehicles approaching our position. Walker checked the radar. Colonel Tom Miller's Desert Warfare Unit had arrived, their specially modified vehicles moving smoothly across the dunes. Unlike the alien ships, these vehicles were designed specifically for desert operations, with extra wide tires and protected engines. Those are Earth military forces, Walker replied. They're here to secure the area. I suggest you don't take hostile action. Your weapon systems are compromised by sand, and they know how to fight in these conditions. The aliens quickly discovered the truth of his words. When several of their soldiers raised weapons, the guns immediately jammed. Sand had worked its way into every mechanical part during the storm. Their energy weapons sparked weakly, their power cells clogged with fine dust. Colonel Miller's voice came over the radio. This is Earth Defense Force Desert Unit. Your ships are surrounded. We've observed your difficulties with our environment and are offering assistance. Resist, and you'll face not just our weapons, but the desert itself. The alien soldiers looked almost comical now, their tall forms floundering in the loose sand as they tried to take defensive positions. Their movements were sluggish, affected by the cold and their failing environmental suits. Their body temperature is dropping dangerously, Dr. Brown noted, watching the thermal readings. Their species must not be adapted to rapid temperature changes. The Supreme Commander must have realized their situation was hopeless. Their ships were half buried, their weapons useless, and their life support systems failing. The desert had done what no human weapon could have. It had completely neutralized their technological advantages. We accept your offer of assistance, the alien leader finally responded. Our forces are in need of immediate aid. Walker watched as Colonel Miller's teams moved in with practiced efficiency. Their vehicles, painted in desert camouflage and covered in protective plates, looked primitive compared to the alien ships. But they were still running perfectly, designed to cope with the very conditions that had brought down the invaders. The desert teaches humility, Ahmed said quietly. Even the strongest must learn to respect it, or they don't survive long. As Earth's military secured the area, Walker couldn't help but wonder how many other alien species would make the same mistake, assuming that advanced technology alone was enough to conquer a world they didn't understand. Dawn brought another challenge the aliens hadn't expected. Their ship's solar panels were now coated with a thin layer of glass. The storm had turned the sand coating their equipment into a crystalline sheet under the intense heat of their failing shields. Their power systems are running on emergency backup, Dr. Brown reported from the research station. The glass layer is blocking most of the solar energy they need to recharge. Walker watched through binoculars as more alien soldiers stumbled out of their ships. Their once proud stance was gone, replaced by exhausted shuffling. Several collapsed in the sand, their silvery skin now a dull gray and covered in scratch marks from the storm. Colonel Miller's Desert Warfare Unit had set up a perimeter around the alien ships, their tan-colored vehicles half buried in the sand for stability. The soldiers wore lightweight desert gear, moving easily across the dunes that had trapped the aliens. Medical team reports critical conditions. Miller radioed to Walker. These aliens are suffering from severe dehydration. Their bodies don't conserve water like ours do. They're losing moisture through their skin faster than they can replace it. The Supreme Commander's voice came through, barely a whisper now. How do you survive here? Our scanners showed this planet was suitable, compatible with life. Earth is compatible with life, Walker replied, but only life that's adapted to its extremes. Your scanners probably showed you our oxygen atmosphere and reasonable gravity, but they missed the million little things that make Earth's environments so challenging. More alien soldiers were collapsing. Their medical teams looked lost, their equipment either sand damaged or unable to cope with the conditions. The proud invasion force that had landed just days ago was literally crumbling in the desert heat. Ahmed approached their position with a group of Bedouin elders. They carried traditional water skins and cooling cloths, knowing better than anyone how to help those stricken by the desert's heat. Your people need water, Ahmed called out to the aliens. Not just any water. They need electrolytes and minerals. The desert takes more than just moisture from your body. The aliens' pride finally broke. Their medical officer, barely able to stand, approached Ahmed and the elders. Please, help us. Our systems, everything is failing. Walker observed as the Bedouin elders showed the aliens how to properly wrap themselves against the sun, how to sip water slowly instead of gulping it, how to find what little shade existed. The contrast was striking. Humans teaching basic survival skills to beings who had mastered interstellar travel. Temperatures rising again, Dr. Brown warned. We're looking at another 115-degree day. Their ship's cooling systems are already at critical levels. The Supreme Commander finally emerged from the command ship, supported by two officers. Their leader's silvery skin had turned almost white, cracking in places from dehydration. They approached Walker with slow, painful steps. Commander Walker, the alien leader spoke, voice rough from sand exposure. I have made a terrible mistake. We saw your cities, your technology level, and thought you were primitive. We never understood. You never understood that our technology evolved to work with our world, not against it, Walker finished. Everything humans build here must survive Earth's extremes. We learned that lesson thousands of years ago. Around them, Earth's military and medical teams worked efficiently in the growing heat, helping alien soldiers into shaded medical tents. The invaders' mighty ships sat useless in the sand, their advanced technology defeated not by human weapons, but by the simple, relentless elements of Earth's harshest environment. Your world, the Supreme Commander coughed. Your world is a fortress. Not because of your defenses, but because of what you had to become to survive here. Walker looked out across the endless dunes, remembering his own first days in the desert years ago. Earth isn't just our planet, he said quietly. It's our teacher. And it's a harsh one. 3 days after the sandstorm, Walker stood before the United Nations Emergency Council through a video link. Behind him, through the research station's windows, teams of humans and aliens worked together to salvage what they could from the buried ships. The invasion force is completely neutralized, Walker reported, not by our weapons, but by Earth itself. Of the original 50 alien soldiers, 32 require serious medical attention for severe dehydration, heat exposure, and sand-related injuries. Their ships are beyond repair. On another screen, Colonel Miller added his report. Their weapons were rendered useless within hours. The sand infiltrated everything. Energy weapons, projectile guns, even their personal armor. They literally couldn't give us a fight even if they wanted to. The council members looked stunned. Some had expected a devastating war, not a victory handed to them by simple sand and heat. What's most interesting, Dr. Brown added, joining Walker at the camera, is how their biology worked against them. Their homeworld has such stable conditions that their bodies never develop the adaptations we take for granted. They can't sweat effectively. Their skin can't protect them from UV radiation. They have no natural defense against rapid temperature changes. Outside, a group of Bedouin elders was teaching younger aliens how to walk properly on sand. The sight was almost comical. 7-foot-tall beings with advanced technology learning basic desert survival from humans who had never left Earth. The Supreme Commander has officially surrendered, Walker continued. But more importantly, they're sending a warning to their homeworld. They're declaring Earth a Class 5 death world, their highest danger rating for habitable planets. An Australian council member leaned forward. Death world. We have billions of people living here quite comfortably. That's exactly the point, Walker explained. The fact that humans can thrive here is what terrifies them. Their scientists are shocked by our biological adaptations. We can survive temperature swings that would kill them. We can go days with minimal water. Our bodies can filter dust from our lungs. To them, we're practically superhumans. The research station's medical bay had been converted to treat the aliens. Human doctors worked alongside alien medics, teaching them about dealing with heat exhaustion and dehydration. The aliens' own medical technology, advanced as it was, hadn't included treatments for conditions they'd never encountered before. Their ships are a total loss, Colonel Miller reported. The sand didn't just damage them. It fundamentally altered their structure. The heat from their shields partially melted the sand, which then cooled into glass-like formations throughout their systems. They'll never fly again. One council member raised a practical question. What do we do with them now? Walker had already considered this. They're not our enemies anymore. They're our students. They want to learn how we survive here. Their civilization has never encountered a world like Earth, where simply existing is a challenge. This could be the beginning of a very different kind of relationship. Through the window, Walker watched as an alien soldier successfully wrapped a traditional desert headscarf under the guidance of Ond. Small victories, but meaningful ones. The aliens were learning that survival didn't always mean having the most advanced technology. The desert has taught them what we could never explain, Walker concluded. Earth isn't just another planet to be conquered. It's a force of nature that shaped humanity into what we are. And now, for the first time, another species understands why we're the way we are. The sun was setting outside, painting the dunes in golden light. The aliens watched in wonder as the temperature began its nightly plunge. They were learning to respect this cycle now, to work with it instead of fighting it. Just as humanity had learned, over thousands of generations, that the only way to survive on Earth was to embrace its harsh lessons. 1 month after the failed invasion, the Sahara Desert had reclaimed almost all signs of the alien presence. Their ships had been carefully dismantled and removed, leaving only faint impressions in the sand that would soon vanish with the next storm. Walker sat in his office at the research station, reviewing the final report he would send to the United Nations. On his desk sat a strange crystal, a piece of alien technology that had been transformed by the desert, sand fused into glass by their malfunctioning shields. It served as a perfect symbol of how Earth had changed their invaders. The last group of aliens leaves today, Dr. Brown said, entering the office. Their rescue ships are modified for desert conditions this time. They're not taking any more chances with Earth's environment. Walker nodded, remembering how different these rescue ships looked. Their hulls coated with heat-reflecting materials, their landing gear specially designed for sand, their systems protected against dust. The aliens had learned their lesson well. Outside, the Supreme Commander stood with Ond and the Bedouin elders, completing one final ritual. They were sharing water from a traditional skin, a ceremony that marked the acceptance of desert wisdom. The once proud alien leader had changed dramatically over the past month, their attitude transformed from conqueror to student. Commander Walker, the alien leader called out as Walker stepped outside. Before we leave, there's something you should know. Our report to the Galactic Council will change how the galaxy sees Earth forever. Walker waited as the alien leader struggled to find the right words. Their silvery skin had healed but still bore faint scars from the sandstorm, permanent reminders of their first encounter with Earth's power. "We came here thinking Earth was a primitive world ready for conquest," the Supreme Commander continued. "Instead, we found something unprecedented, a death world that produced a species strong enough to thrive in its extremes. Do you know what that means?" "That Earth is too dangerous to invade," Walker suggested. The alien made a sound that might have been laughter. "More than that. It means humanity is uniquely qualified to help us. There are worlds in our empire we've never been able to colonize because they're too harsh. But your people could teach us how to survive there." This was unexpected. Walker had thought the aliens would want to forget Earth entirely. Instead, they were seeing an opportunity. "Your technology combined with our adaptability," Walker mused. "That could be a powerful partnership." Dr. Brown joined them, carrying data crystals. "We've prepared environmental survival guides for your people," she told the Supreme Commander. "Everything from basic desert survival techniques to the biological adaptations that help us endure extreme conditions." The alien leader accepted the crystals carefully. "Your world has taught us that true strength isn't about having the most advanced technology. It's about being able to survive and thrive in the harshest conditions. Humanity does this every day on every part of your world." As if to emphasize this point, the wind picked up, carrying the hint of sand. The aliens instinctively moved to protect themselves, their reactions now matching what they had learned from the desert dwellers. They had changed, fundamentally and permanently. The rescue ships powered up their engines, their new designs barely disturbing the sand beneath them. Before boarding, the Supreme Commander turned to Walker one last time. "We came to conquer Earth," they said softly, "but instead, Earth conquered us. And in doing so, it made us better. Our civilization will never be the same." Walker watched as the ships lifted off, their hulls glinting in the sunlight. They rose smoothly, without the arrogant display of power that had marked their arrival. As they disappeared into the sky, Walker looked out across the endless dunes that had defended Earth more effectively than any weapon. "The desert," Amn said, standing beside him, "always teaches the truth, whether you want to learn it or not." In the distance, another sandstorm was brewing. But this time, it was just weather, not a weapon. The desert had already fought its war and won, teaching a lesson that would spread across the galaxy. Earth wasn't just a planet with life on it. It was a force that shaped life into something extraordinary.